I'll start the recording. All right, so this is a pretty interesting idea, and I wonder what's going to happen. See, there is no security software for the iPhone because you have to get everything from the Apple Store, and Apple doesn't think you need it, and they won't let you put anything in. There's no hacking tools, there's no firewall, there's no nothing for the iPhone. So these guys have put in something like Tripwire. Now, what they explained is they're trying to tell if your phone has been hacked and warn you. But the problem is apps are sandboxed away. You don't have access to the system and stuff, so you pretty much have to guess. So this guy has tried to, and they keep it secret what they do because, of course, the malware could just write malware that this tool can't detect. So anyway, but he claims it looks for what clues you can find that show that your phone has been hacked, and it will warn you if you've been hacked, and it is currently in the store. We'll see what happens. Apple has a history of pulling these things out of the store before long. Anyway, one thing that would be nice about it, though, is now every phone can be jailbroken easily with the new exploits. So it probably would be more important than ever to have such a tool to warn you. So Intel, I've seen several articles about this lately, and it sounds pretty awesome. It'd be good to throw in like the exploit development or the malware analysis class so I can figure out how to get some of this stuff working. But you, in Windows, I've started getting into the bootloader because the modern technique to infect the kernel is to infect the bootloader first because you have to turn off Microsoft signature enforcement. But there's another way, which is to find signed drivers. Now, some bad guys actually steal code signing certificates and then sign the malware, and that's one way to get in. But another way is to just find defects in existing signed drivers, and that's what happened here. Apparently, you have third-party kernel mode drivers, and they're still vulnerable. And this is strange to me because I thought the whole point of signed code is that you can't modify it. But these guys can modify the functions in the signed drivers. So something is wrong here that I haven't quite got. But the driver is trusted to put in the kernel because it's signed, but then they found some way to exploit it. So I'm not a WinRing 0 included here. It's not only vulnerable to local privilege escalation attacks, but it's used under 24 names and widespread. So maybe it's not that they modified the code, they just found a way to exploit the code without modifying it. Anyway, it's interesting, and we'll see what comes of that. And hopefully I'll be able to turn some of this into projects after I understand it better. I got a new book on rootkits and bootkits, and it has steps to get there, and I'm going to cover the first bit of it in some early projects this semester. And I may eventually just have another class in like rootkits and low-level stuff, because it is pretty a whole different world, and it's important in the world of IoT hacking. Anyway, this I thought was interesting. So they had this, the thing that was interesting is not so much that they got caught by filling up the whole driver. What happened is they had a security incident 3 years ago, and they claimed they had fixed it, and they didn't fix it. A bad guy was still in there for 2 more years, doing whatever they wanted, stealing everything, until they finally filled an entire hard drive and made a server crash is how they finally caught him. And this, I think, is extremely common. So they got punished by the government, and they had access to them for 2 years before they figured out that they had been permanent entry. And I would, in my opinion, this is probably most businesses have a permanent bad guy in there. Most of them seem to have no clue about security. It's too hard. They would have no way to know. That's why I say most people never figure out they've been hacked at all for like 9 months. And the only reason they ever figure it out is the FBI comes from outside and tells them, we found your stolen data somewhere. So I don't think that happens to much of the stolen data. Much of the stolen data probably never gets captured by the FBI. The other companies are probably just permanently owned. And so the FTC has a settlement, and the settlement requires them to detect malicious uploads, do code reviews, segment their network, and try to detect unusual activity. And that sounds good, but I'm not quite sure what you would do. I think you'd put on Tripwire, maybe Splunk, but there's probably nothing you can buy and afford and run that would really do this very well. So I'm not, everybody needs to know if they've been hacked. In my opinion, the best thing you could do is Think's Canary. Then you could tell if they stole the data and used it. That, I think, is very effective. You put extra email addresses and hyperlinks and stuff in your page, and then if somebody steals your data and sells it and starts using it, then you'll see traffic going to those fake addresses that shouldn't have any traffic. Then you know you got hacked. I think that's a lot more effective than this stuff, trying to catch the tracks of the bad guy coming in, just like that iPhone thing, because all they have to do is use a sneaky technique or just use a technique that you didn't think of, and then these methods won't work.
How is it the normal way to get hacked?
What's that?
How is the normal way to get hacked?
The normal way to get hacked, the most common is phishing. They send you a phishing email, somebody clicks on it. Then you get the ability to run code on one machine, usually an end machine, probably without administrator rights. Then you try to escalate privileges. Then you try to move around. But the point is, once you've done, this happens all the time. That's why you have antivirus and stuff. And then you implant permanent malware on the machines and keep control. You put rootkits on the servers. And if you're like an APT, you have advanced stuff you hide everywhere. You even put like sleeper processes that won't wake up until later. So, once you're in, it's really hard to ever be sure you're gone. And I think most companies do not at all have the ability to detect an intrusion or to thoroughly eject an intruder, and they don't have the money to hire somebody like Mandia that can really come in and do it. So I think they probably all have just a permanent amount of bad guys on the network. Hey there, so you want to ride later?
Yes, if at all
yeah,
possible.
Sure. Well, you know what time you'll be done?
Well, I'm going to try to finish up before 8.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, and which room are you in?
204 or 200, either one, depending on.
Okay, if I finish up early, I'll talk to you because I might leave and go get Caitlin and come back.
Oh, okay.
So
Right.
I'll contact you before I leave. We'll work it out.
In the classroom?
Yeah, I'll go up there if I don't see you down here. Good. Okay. Good. Sure. Good. All right. So anyway, McAfee has code execution in it, which is pretty rude. This happens frequently. The antiviruses have serious flaw, and so anyway, that's good, clean fun. Very few people get really mad about this, and they said they didn't validate whether DILs have been signed. So you can just inject a malicious DIL and get into McAfee. So a lot of people get real sore at antivirus for vulnerabilities like that. And Qualcomm's Secure World Mobile Vault leaks data. And the technique here, I think, it has a trusted execution environment, which is like the TPM, which is like the secure element. It's a hardware area that is supposed to be very secure. And they were able to exploit the component. And they got here by fuzzing. They fuzzed it until they found some form of memory corruption vulnerability, and I'm not quite sure I could get a clear explanation of what it is. But anyway, there's always something. This is pretty good. This is Iranian hacking group, APT33, is hacking everybody, and then they decided to hide, but instead of using Tor, they built their own VPN network with fixed IP addresses of the servers. And this is like really stupid because now there's only like a dozen of your VPN servers and all the traffic from them is the APTs. And so you make yourself more obvious, not less. I don't know why you bother to VPN your stuff under these conditions. This shows like a failure to comprehend what you're doing. So anyway, there's a time for a VPN. I use one. Anybody could see which VPN I'm using. It's going to Viper. I don't care about that. But if you're trying to hide your tracks, this is not an improvement if you have VPN used just for you, which is why the privacy, the criminals of the world and the privacy fanatics use Tor. And they rediscover every 2 years that it is a US military project, and they carefully designed it to be used by people to watch porn and steal movies because those people provide cloaking for the spies. The purpose of it is so spies in foreign nations can send data back to the CIA. And if only spies were using it, it wouldn't work for this reason. So they let all the idiots in the world use it to steal stuff, and they form a crowd of noise in which the spies can hide. So if you're going to hide, you have to be on a public system with a lot of other people. Anyway, you don't have a private system if you're trying to hide. Anyway, yeah, so there's an asteroid that keeps coming around. There's an asteroid that's all metal, and they think it's the heart of a planet. And it's big, and therefore it contains an incredible amount of iron and nickel and in principle some gold and stuff, and the total amount of money in there adds up to some ridiculous number, so it makes a big deal out of it. But they're going to go visit it. They're not planning to dig the gold out of it and bring it back. I mean, there's no way that it is worth, cost benefits come out of actually mining an asteroid like that, but they are going to land on it and try to figure out what's inside planets and stuff. It's called Psyche. So anyway, what's that? Who's already doing it? I think Japan landed on a different asteroid, but not this one. Psyche, I think, is NASA's mission is going to get there in, I think, 2025. Yeah, and I think somebody landed on a comet about a year ago, too. A comet, which is a whole different thing. And comets are just snowballs. But yeah, they did find out something and get a sample and bring it back. And I think they'll land on this thing. The only different thing is this is an all-metal asteroid. And that's of geoplanetary significance to understand how planets form. That's the idea. Anyway.
Why would you do somebody else's work?
Well, it's not the same. See, if you were studying.
The target is different, that's all.
What's that?
Only the target is different.
That's right. Only the target is different. That's right. It's not the technique that's different so much as the target that's different. And that's interesting for people who want to study planetary formation. That's all. It's pure science. This one is getting a lot of press. I don't know if it's going to hold up, but as we all have known for years, if you take a flight anywhere across a border, they can search your laptop. And this is like a problem for people who might have company data on their laptop. And many people argue about this. When I went to China, they were all freaking out. What should we do? I've never had my stuff searched, but people freak out. And now they're trying to say it's not constitutional, which is a big change because they felt free to do this for about 10 years. And everybody has been talking about what you have to do, put all your stuff in the cloud, wipe your laptop, go through and download it all at the other end or something. So if this holds up, this is a big change. Yeah.
This is not the first time in court that rules it is unconstitutional, but the government doesn't care anyway.
Well, they've somehow been able to do it. I think, anyway, we'll see what comes to this. It certainly is a big privacy issue. And I've never heard anybody suggest that you have any right to refuse, ever. In fact, they've said that if you don't.
Yeah, you have the right to refuse, but then the customer will let you leave.
Yeah, you can't. You'll miss your plane, and I think they can even like lock you up or impound your stuff.
Yeah.
So it's pretty bad.
They make you wait until you agree to surrender.
Yeah, I think that's right. So anyway, we'll see what comes of this. There may be some change in that. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff.
You know, Trump's trade war is over.
It's over?
Yeah,
Can you make a deal with China?
Because Huawei just give bonus to their employees for getting around the U.S. sanctions.
How did they get around it?
Because they design their own chips and make their own software. So Huawei is giving a bunch of money to the chip groups and software group. And then they also check up bonus for all the employees 1 month.
But how does that end the trade war?
Huh?
How did the trade war end?
So that means Huawei doesn't rely on the US.
Oh, okay. So Huawei is surviving the trade war. Yeah. It's not that it's over.
So that Trump,
okay.
Doesn't matter for using Huawei again. So
well, that's
Chinese won't
okay.
There's no point after that,
Well, that's some other Chinese company just had a huge decline in profits. So I think it may be affecting some people, but maybe not Huawei. Anyway.
Huawei is actually announcing the sale to be 30% off.
Yeah, of course. It could be all fake.
Then the next step is payback time. All the Silicon Valley companies are reporting sales down. So
yeah, the next step. Well, we'll see. If the trade war does not affect China, then I think you're right. That would be a pretty major failure of the Trump policy. They're assuming that we can actually hurt China by not trading with them. Anyway, there's more of this stuff to do, and we'll see. I don't think I may finish this whole second section today, but we didn't finish this one last time because it got sort of tedious. So this is all about artifacts in Windows, and there are a ton of them, and they're super important. Windows is the world's biggest spyware. It is keeping records in hundreds of places of everything you do, and your Windows Forensic Examiner needs to get pretty good at finding them. So it's good to be aware of these, and this is the stuff you mostly look for when you're analyzing Windows systems to try to figure out what people have been doing. So the tool you get for free with Windows is Event Viewer, and there are a bunch of other tools that try to take the events from Event Viewer and reformat them and reindex them. And the one we're using here is Splunk, and I think Sysmon is a tool that does this, and there are many others. From many people have written Python scripts and other tools to try to make it easier to harvest Windows event logs, because Windows event logs are very detailed and also very hard to read. So there are tools to try to make it easier. And then there are scheduled tasks. On Windows systems, in Linux, there's the thing called cron. In Windows, they have this thing called Task Scheduler. And you used to, back in the days of Windows XP, you would just use at time execute this program. And the fun thing about that on Windows XP Home Edition is that everything scheduled in this fashion ran as system. So you could escalate yourself from a limited user up to privilege this way by doing 5 minutes from now, launch CMD, and then CMD would launch a system. It was bloody awesome. So anyway, they fixed that. And anyway, so that's one way to do it with just this app command, but that's the real old way. The modern technique is the SCH task command, which is not used that often by attackers because the old one still works. And there's a GUI to make scheduled tasks. And I mean, the Linux system, cron jobs, are listed in a folder, and many of them are just listed in a folder called hourly and daily and weekly, and there are other ones. And the Microsoft task scheduler works about the same way. There's just job files, and those are just little files in system root tasks, and these files specify all the things to run. One time we had a practice exam for students, and I wanted to let people share it, so I tried to figure out a way to make a login system like NetLab. And I finally wrote some ASP code that was like everything I write, about 20 lines of ASP code. And what I did was I made scheduled tasks that every hour of every day of every month, it would just keep changing the password to log in. And you would just make a reservation. It would change that file, so it changed to your password every hour. So people could just pick a time, and then your password would work for that hour, and it'd be somebody else's password. That was my really simple solution. I found, I didn't know this, but I put 365 scheduled tasks to go off times 24, like a whole year worth of tasks going every hour, and it worked just fine. And that was on like Windows 2003 server or something. So it's totally clumsy. Like everything I do, it's like hitting it with a hammer, but it works. So anyway, when I was in the financial business, my boss told me that it's better to get the job done than to be clever. So instead of figuring out how to make a loop or something, just find a procedure that will get to the end and you're done. I often just do the simplest. One thing he showed me, which kind of blew my mind, is you'd have to do something like 1,000 files. So instead of like looping it, you just put the command in Excel spreadsheets and then create the 1,000 lines you need and then copy them into the command prompt. This gets the job done. I learned to think like this. You know,
Excel automatically increase the number.
Yeah. And then you just copy that into like a batch file and run it. And it gets the job done, but it is so inelegant. I came from scientific elegance and beauty and make a perfect loop and figure out what all the variables are. Don't do that crap. That's just complicated. It will just be wrong. Do it this way, and then it'll be right every time. I learned to stop being clever because you have to get it right. And you have to have it do something so simple that someone else can check it and make sure it's right. I've tried to have this complicated formula that nobody can understand, and he said, that's not how you do it. Anyway, so then you got logs of these things. This thing, I thought it was spelled wrong. It really is schedlgu.txt. That's the name of the task scheduler log. And of course, it has event logs. Everything that happens makes event logs too. So anyway, the jobs file is just a binary file that has the user information and the file path and other junk in there. And you can parse the binary file. Remember, this is the old evil Microsoft. Until around 2003 or so, 2008, Microsoft had a different binary format for everything. And then they finally wised up and said, you know, we ought to just make everything XML files because this is getting out of hand. But in the old days, they had a different binary format for documents and spreadsheets and configuration files and just everything. Whoever was making it would make up some stupid binary format. And then you needed a parser for everything before they finally reformed and said, we're just going to use XML for everything like Linux does. Anyway, so you can parse this thing. It's just got all the obvious information in there, like how often to run it and who to run it as, but instead of just having a plain text file, they put it in some screwy format. Then there's a log, and the log just lists, you know, this job started at this time, this job finished, and so on, just what you figure would be in there. And the event log records everything, right? User registered a task, the task scheduler requested to launch it, the task scheduler did launch it, the task scheduler did this action on it. You know, every single thing you do turns into a whole bunch of events in the event log. If you just like open a folder and double click on a notepad file, you've made about 80 events. It's just maddening. But that's the way it is. It's all in there. All right, so I got some cooch about this stuff, and then we'll go into the next chapter and get at least part way through it. So this was 12A3. That was my theory. 152 might be chapter, 12A3. There it is. Good. All right. Theoretically, I've got my cahoots running, and there ought to be some sound. Good, there's some sound. All right. I think things are under control here. Good.
There's something special tonight?
No, nothing particularly. I just got to have registry after this.
Registry?
Yeah, 12B. The chapter 12 is 3 lectures because there's so much in Windows. And this is
After class?
After class, we're going to get ready for a contest. There's a contest this weekend in Berkeley, a hacking devices contest, and we're all assembling there. I have to take a bunch of people and drive them there. All day tomorrow and all day Saturday, they're going to be hacking SCADA devices or something.
Are you going to go there tonight?
Yes.
Cool.
After class, we're going to go there tonight, and then because it starts at like 6:30 in the morning on Saturday and 9 on Friday, and it goes all day. So I'm part of the crew transporting people anyway, and it's a contest we've never done before, so we'll see how it goes. All right. Anyway, I guess we got enough people. All right, let's see what we got. So 1 instance per task. All right. All right, those are the job files. Okay. Where do login events go? In the security log, of course, you'll see them in Splunk and everything. In Linux, it's auth log, same thing. That's obviously super important to know who logged in or who tried to log in and what time they were in there. That's obviously really important for everything. So what item prevents a 32-bit app from messing up the 64-bit system? Talked about this last time. That's the redirector, so that it lies to the 32-bit app. So if a 32-bit app thinks it's changing a folder or a registry key, it's not really. It's changing a fake registry key that only that app is going to see, not the real registry key that would mess up 64-bit apps. So it's kind of screwy and can lead, of course, to strange consequences. But anyway, it does in practice mean that you can totally use 32-bit software on a 64-bit system, and most of the time it runs just fine. Which one of these will persist until a reboot? Okay, well, the job file, all right, it persists until reboot. I thought it might even persist after that, but anyway, I haven't checked it. And which one has a complete copy of the whole volume? Okay, and that's the shadow copy, of course, which we talked about. So I've got Anton, WITB, I know who that is. And then I've got MHino, which is a real name, I think. Okay. All right, and let me just check that job file that's not persisting after reboot, because that sounds a little screwy. And I wonder if I can figure, yeah, files persist until shut down or reboot. So, well, I got to look into this. You know, I've got a Windows server I'm using for one of the projects, and when I reboot it, not all my tasks restart like I think they should. So I've got to, that may be part of the problem. It's harder than it looks to make a Windows thing that will automatically start every time you reboot the system. I think I keep not getting it right. Anyway, let's take a look at 12B, which should be the registry, and it is. All right. And so I say this may be too big to cover in one night. It's Windows is very huge, and the registry is super important. In the old days, Microsoft had things like sys.ini and autoexec.bat, and it had these little text configuration files just scattered all over the place. And around Windows 95, Microsoft decided to clean it all up and put it in this big mess, a big binary file called the registry. And that's the point. It has all the configuration data for all the apps and all the Windows settings, and a ton of things in here are recording everything you do. The basic idea is in Windows 95 and Windows 98, you had these menus, file, edit, and view, and all these menu items. And then with Windows XP came out, they had all these new menus on the start menu and stuff. And what happened is the menus got really long. And so when Windows 2000, before XP came out, Microsoft decided that the menus would become smart. So instead of the menu showing you all 20 items, it would show you only the 5 that you've used most recently. And the others wouldn't show up unless you hovered and hunted for them, to try to make the menus more useful. And then they did like some theoretical studies and decided that menus are a terrible system. People can't find things. What you should have instead of like big tiles on a desktop. And that's how they sort of moved in the world of Windows 8, which was kind of horrible for most of us. But they decided menus, especially menus where there's an item and a sub-item and a sub-item, just become hard to navigate and people can't find things. Anyway, so they tried to struggle with all this a lot. But the main thing they did was they made your machine customized. Your machine had a rudimentary form of intelligence. It would remember what you appear to prefer and leave it that way. And all those things that remember your preferences are recording what you do as an unintended consequence. And so they're all of great forensic value. And it is like everything Microsoft does, they end up with like 50 different ways to do the same thing, because they don't think logically and mathematically like Linux. It's just a bunch of people saying, this would be cool, let's throw it in. This would be cool, let's throw it in. Like Facebook. They say, move fast and break things, just add cool features, and don't worry about whether it's logical or anything. People just want more cool features. So the Hive files are where the registry is stored. It's stored in 5 registry hives, which is typical Microsoft. Instead of being stored in one file or being stored in files that have some kind of logical structure, it's of no apparent logic at all. There's system security, software, SAM, and default. SAM is security accounts manager. And then there's a user-specific one called ntuser.dat, which applies to only that user when they log in and is in your profile, user's username. And then another user, class.dat down here too. So all these files are combined to create the registry. And so when you first log in, you create a profile, and that gets you in the profile folder. You have your own ntuser.dat, and now from that point on, everything you do is remembered to personalize your profile. And if somebody logs in with another different username, they get different settings than you do. So now you can have your own background color and your own window size and font size and all that jazz. So these are the keys, and those are the values. And it looks like folders and contents, but it's not. You can't have an empty folder. Every key has to have a value. That's why a lot of them have default value not set, because there's no actual values in there, but you can't have it empty of values. It's really just a apparent graphical representation of a simple database. And you have to, if you have a record, the record has to have some contents, even if it's just default value not set. And so these are the 5 root keys: classes root, current user, local machine, users, and current config. And this is pretty maddening. Some of them are actually duplicates of data found in the others, and current user doesn't even exist except in the running system. It's not on the hard drive. There's control set 1, 2, and 3 or something, and when you boot in, it decides which control set you're in, and that becomes the current control set. We'll get there. And there's all the users are down here, and when you log in, one of them becomes the current user. So that's, again, something in RAM that is not on the disk at all. So it's a little bit screwy. So anyway, HK users has got SID for each user. Each user is uniquely identified by a security identifier, which is a 128-bit long number, and that's the unique identifier, and your username is just calculated from that. Anyway, so there are these virtual key paths. HK current user really just goes to HK user. SID current control set really goes to one of these control sets with a number. HK classes root is actually the merger of 2. So this is Microsoft at its finest. Everything is fantastically illogical and redundant and mixed up. That's how Microsoft stuff always is. Anyway, this actually contains the contents of 2 other subkeys from other roots, then stuck here. It's like really messed up from a viewpoint of logic. This is why some people just get sick and go to Unix. If you're like a mathematician, you use Unix. If you're a business person, you use Windows, because they will have stuff designed to do your one business activity with total disregard for the fact there are 5 other similar business activities that have stuff just for them that's almost the same. There's always like 10 ways to do the same thing on Windows. In Unix, there's like one way that is mathematically the right way. So anyway, there are timestamps for registry items on here, and they only one timestamp for each one. So it's changed when you add, remove, or change a registry key. So you can see what's been going on in the registry to some extent. So there's a run key, which is programs that launch on system startup. We talked about it before. This is one of the simplest places to put a mark if you want. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn off this nonsense. There we go. But it's not that. It's some kind of garbage on a web page playing. It's Kahoot playing some kind of garbage. All right. Let me see if I can get Kahoot to stop playing garbage. Okay. Anyway. Run keys here. You can You can see run things here. It's going to launch VMware or something, Adobe something, and Windows Update, and they have the key last write time, but you can't tell when they were added without other evidence because they could. The only time that they're written is when you change a value, add, remove, or change. But if you change the name of the key or something, then I think it will change. But if you change the contents of it, it won't change the timestamp. So this is fairly common. You have to be very careful when interpreting timestamps anywhere in the computer system because they don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. Anyway, and it turns out to be a big deal. You can often send the wrong person to prison by misinterpreting a timestamp. It is a very common mistake of forensic examiners. Anyway, let's see, where am I? All right. Anyway, so we talked about this. It also frequently changes the update time for a lot of things, and it's not easy for the attacker to erase them. So, the timestamps are there, but they're problematic. They're not at all as useful as timestamps on folders. And as we mentioned before, there's registry reflection and redirection. Certain programs see lies about the registry from things like the WOW64 subsystem. So again, 32-bit forensic software will not see the whole registry. It will see an illusory registry where certain parts of it are lies. So here's some important ones. System configuration, shim cache, auto run, and user hive. These are general categories. So system configuration registry keys have all important things like the computer name, the Windows version, and the time zone. The time zone is super important because figuring out what time things happen and whether somebody's been resetting the time is, of course, a big deal if you're trying to figure out what happened and your attacker is messing with the time zone. There's a list of all the installed applications here, of course. It's there so you can uninstall them. And there's a list of mounted devices, which is very important too, floppy drives and so on. And then there's USB store. When my forensic examiner for criminal cases trained me, he said the first thing you always do is go here because you have a search warrant. You go search somebody's office, you impound their computer, you take it to the examiner. The examiner will now have like a week to examine the machine, but the first thing you do is look in USB store because that shows you all the other storage devices that were attached to the machine. And the first thing you do is list that, and then you go back to the attorney and say, write another search warrant and also impound these devices, a thumb drive or movable floppy drive, whatever else, because that's got more evidence on it. And the reason this exists, again, is not because Microsoft wants to spy on you. It's because USB devices require drivers, and the drivers have to be loaded in the kernel. And so it keeps track of the first time you plug in a USB device, it loads the driver. And if you plug it in again, it doesn't have to load the driver anymore because it looks here and says, oh, I already have the driver. So this list is a permanent, ever-growing list of all the USB things that have ever been plugged in. All the USB devices add drivers, and they just add more and more drivers. There is no process to give up on them and clean them out or anything. There is, you can clean them out manually, and by the way, I had a... Yeah, see, well, there are conditions under which it keeps loading the same driver over and over and over. For a month at home, I lost my internet connection. I went through my cell phone on a wireless card, and I had a USB wireless card. And every single time I rebooted the machine, it would make another copy of the driver and another virtual device until I had like 300 virtual wireless cards. And now everything's slowed down. And this is a known problem. USB is very buggy. It frequently gets confused and adds multiple copies of the same USB device, which is wasteful. Yeah, anyway, and it causes things. You have to go into Device Manager and view invisible devices and delete them. It's very annoying. It takes like 3 or 4 mouse clicks for each one, and I tried to find a way to like write a script and automate it, and there wasn't any PowerShell at that time. It was pretty hard to do. Probably you can do it in PowerShell.
Format the whole thing, whatever, like taking like 30 minutes.
Well, I don't know. It depends on how fast it is. It's usually, flash drives are usually slow to write and fast to read. So writing a lot of them is much slower.
But is this the difference between a hard drive on a desktop?
Yeah.
And then That means a flashlight take shorter time to format it many times.
Well, the flash drive is actually slower, but it is smaller. So it's complicated. And it makes a big difference whether you have USB 2 or 3 also.
I bought like a few flash drive from Costco. It's like around 256 gigabyte drive on a flash drive, and it's very fast to format it.
Yeah, that's good. It must be really USB 3.
But information is still there, right?
Well, they're also often defective and buggy. In fact, there's an awful lot of bogus ones sold. Like if you get the cheap ones that are Chinese knockoffs, they often have inferior components or even the wrong components in them. And the drive module, the hardware, it's often misidentified by the machine, so it often goes to USB 2 mode when it shouldn't. So I found often when you plug in a drive, it doesn't work, and you have to go to the back to get it to work. But USB is a pretty buggy technology. Anyway, so then there's network adapters. This has a list of your IP address and such, and the wireless networks you've been using, and the shares you've been using, and the firewall settings. All these things are stored in the registry. And you have their policy and the profile folder path, and the groups you're in is all stored in the registry. And there's a shim cache. And this is where you get into the kind of madness. One of the links that didn't load today was using detours to hack into a machine. I mentioned before, Microsoft is very adaptable. So you can have a computer with something like Windows 7 on it, and then you can decide to add like a Bluetooth keyboard. And so now all input to all the apps have to come through that keyboard, and that keyboard requires a special driver. So you can easily give a global adjustment to the system saying, send everything through this extra program. So this is the application compatibility cache, and this keeps track of special compatibility settings for programs that might have different things like this. And so in addition to keeping track of what settings are required to make this program run, they're also recording, when that program ran. And it goes here in the compat cache, and this has up to 1024 entries. So it also will include apps that have never actually been run. They've just been installed, but they have a compatibility setting, and it's stored here so you can see it.
What does shim stand for?
What shim? Oh, shim is just a word for a little piece of wood to fill in a gap. So it's suggesting what it is. You have like a Windows 98 program, you want to run it on Windows 10, so you have a shim to make it a little bigger to fit into Windows 10. That's kind of what it is. So there's a shim cache parser.py is a program that will go in here and figure out what's going on there. You can get registry hives and other entries, and then it will show you when it was last modified, where it is, how big it is, and stuff like that. Information is stored by accident along with this compatibility information. All right, so I got some cahoots about that. And see, we're 638, so I think we can do at least one more section of these things. This is going to be 152, 12B2. Okay. I think that's the right one. My numbers are getting a little complicated. If I paid Kahoot, they would let me sort these into folders. It might be about time to do that. Limited free trials are very effective on me. They irritate me until I finally pay, which is exactly the point. Yeah, I think that's good. I think he probably has to retire from his old business at a certain age, so learning computer security would probably be a good plan. I had various guys take my computer tech classes because they had to move for another job. Like I knew a guy that used to haul nuclear waste and military stuff around that was really heavy. And he took a lot of steroids, and he was this huge guy. And then finally he hurt his back. So he had to retrain his computer tech. You can't keep that stuff up forever. And I think in the same spirit, eventually Ron Jeremy's going to have to change his profession. That's another one where you can't be too old. Anyway, so. All right. Let's see what we got here.
He's still old, but he still does it.
What's that?
160.
Yeah. No, well, I don't know. Must really be him. Anyway, so which item lowers risk? That can't be the right one. That can't. Oh, I'm the wrong class. Wait, let's get rid of that. No, this 152 is the wrong class. Uh-oh. All right. Well, forget that. What is this class?
152. It says like 152.
This is 152.
Yeah. It did the one right under it. That's the one.
160?
Yeah.
That can't be right. This isn't 160.
That's the,
The last
one
time
that was
you-
just on.
The last time you.
Oh, I hit the 160.
Last time you
Okay,
did
thank you.
160.
So it's this one we want. All right, let's see what these people are saying. Perhaps telling me the same thing. 12B1. Yes, we want 12B1, which is here. There it is. Why, thank you. All right. Well, I had a bad feeling about that. All right, let's see. Let's see if this looks like the right thinking questions. Ought to be something about the registry. See, that's really Ron Jeremy. It's got to be. All right, used to be 7. Maybe one of them gave up, intimidated by Ron Jeremy. I'll give it 5 more seconds. All right. Ah, good. Okay, which of these is not in a captured registry? This is a good one. Right. That's one. If you take the copy of the disk files that make up the registry, current control set is not there. There's control set 001, 002, and 003, but this is a temporary copy of that only appears in a running system, not in a static image. Anyway, right, which one has 128 recently used programs? As of, I think, about Windows 7. Unfortunately, I think this has actually changed in Server 2016. Yeah, it's the prefetch, but I think it now has 1024 in supposedly in 2016. I haven't tested it, but supposedly it has a bigger number now. And which one is only there on 64-bit systems? Wow, of course, Windows on Windows. That is the VMware-like thing that lets you run 32-bit code on a 64-bit system. All right. And which Hive file has many instances on a single computer? Okay, that's it. Every user has their own NT user. The rest of these have only one copy that's shared by the whole system. All right, and hey, what is this garbage? Okay, good. Okay, they've changed the format. This is what people do. They update stuff and generally irritate me. All right, so these get 6, WK gets 3. Yeah. All right, so Kahoot and IM. Well, IM is going to have to tell me who they are. But anyway, all right, it'll do. That makes me want to pay them less, please. They should have some way to turn that off. Let's see if this person is telling me who they are. Yes, okay, good. Oh, well, that's actually close to the real name. All right, anyway. All right, so good. And at 6:44, I think we can do one more section of these, and that'll be all right. So I go here, and I get rid of this, and let's see what we got. Okay, so let's talk about Autorun. I mentioned this before. This is real important for malware to make it automatically launch when you restart the machine. So, or when the user logs in or other things, and this turns out that there are hundreds of ways to do it, so it's very hard to stop all the weird junk that loads automatically in your machine. Services, for example, you turn on your machine, it's running about 60 services in the background, and all those automatically launch. And you can just trick it into launching extra code along with those services. So that's a big target. Every service has its own subkey in current control set services, and it's got a list of how to start it, and then it's got a list to the executables that run those services. Most of the services are DILs, though. They are not EXEs. So they run using SVC host to launch them. Services.exe is the service control manager, and that you can use the SC command at the command line to run it, and that's what's doing it. So you can here do SC query WUA serve, which I think is Windows Update, although I'm not quite sure what it is, and it tells you what it is. This is something Kirk did. One huge issue ever since Windows 10 came out is we have to find some way to block the sneaking updates because the updates are so terrible. And the best technique I saw from Ed Bott, who's a Windows expert, is you had to go and change your internet connection to be metered, to tell the operating system that you have to pay by the megabyte for your, and then it will no longer automatically update through it. But Kirk found you can just stop the Windows Update service, and that stops the updates from coming down, and that seemed like a much cleaner technique. And you can disable it, and then it won't even come up after reboot or something. It was pretty good.
So you use the SC inside SC?
He did it in the graphical services manager, but you could do it here too, I think. I'm just not quite sure if that's the Windows Update service, but I think it is. But he was able to find the Windows Update service and stop it, and that really did block the updates. He also would go into the Internet Explorer settings and block the Microsoft addresses that the update server uses, and that would do it too. There's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of ways to block updates. And anyway, so here's the services GUI that you could go in and do the same thing that SC does. You can do it from here. CO services and stop them and start them and disable them, adjust them. So one executable might have a lot of services. So if I do tasklist.svc, here's an SVC host and it's launching all these things, app info and bits and all those things. And we've seen that before using Process Monitor or Process Explorer, where you can just see all the running processes and you could see that one SVC host entry is running maybe a dozen things. And all those things are controlled in.
Actually, SVC host open to SVC host.
Yes, and each one of them is running like a dozen processes, and you can add more to them. Each one's running like a dozen executables. So, yeah. Anyway, so there's run keys. There's run and run once, and then there's another place under your SID which will run and run once. Yeah.
One of them, HK key. The bottom two lines. One of them is one and another one is one once.
What's wrong?
The bottom two row.
Yeah.
One of them is run once and.
Oh yeah, you're right. The first one to be run, not run once. You're right. Anyway, and the point is, these are ones that will run when you start the machine, and these will run when that user logs in with that particular SID. So there's run and run once keys, and there's something called active setup, which is intended to handle software installation and updates. So again, you have subkeys tied to GUIDs, which are tying to applications, and then it can have things like here is installed and the path to do things. So again, this would make it automatically run code. There are many, many ways to make it automatically run code. And then there's app-init DILs we talked about before. It's in another class though. App-init DILs are for user interactions. Like the example I gave before, you might have some kind of goofy advanced keyboard that you want every program to use, and programs might have been compiled only thinking of this keyboard. So you add an app-init DIL, and now everything that uses user32.dil will also load these DILs because you have some extra user interaction, some other DILs are needed, and you can put malicious things in there. Then there's the local security authority. This is what loads on startup, intended to authenticate things. And it's been a huge security problem forever. Back in the days of Windows XP, you could find the administrator password in plain text in something called the Local Security Authority secrets. But anyway, there's authentication packages here of various types, and you can add malware to that also. Then there are browser helper objects. Browser helper objects are extra toolbars. These turned out to be a terrible idea. These were what most of the malware type toolbars were, like a stupid Yahoo search bar and the Ask search bar and the Komodo bar, until your browser is all full of garbage. And Microsoft finally got fed up with it and took them out of Edge, but they're in every version of IE. And a lot of people are still using IE. And they're all in the registry, and all these things launch along with your browser. They were Microsoft's answer for like Firefox extensions. And they turned out to just be used for so many malicious things, they finally took them Then there are shell extensions, and these are to have right-click menus. Your right-click has certain menus like cut and copy, but you can add special right-click things to it, and this is what software does. For example, 7-zip. If you install 7-zip, then when you right-click a file, it'll say 7-zip compress or something, and it does it by just putting it in here. Shell X, in the Shell X, it now contains 7-zip. So there's another item in the right-click menu. So it's just in the registry. Then there's the WinLogon shell. When you log on, it normally launches Explorer, and Explorer draws the desktop and the start button, and you can use it, but you could do something else when people log on by changing this registry key. So you could, for example, launch a keylogger and then launch the desktop, that kind of thing. And in principle, you could even be like a Unix user and actually have a different desktop, like they have GNOME and all that jazz. Well, I think some people actually did that for Windows at one time. But anyway, my obvious use is for malware. Then you've got user init. This will load scripts. You can have login scripts and other kinds of auto runs. These are things that will run when you log in. They've had login scripts all the way back to Windows 98. I remember using them. Things that will run as soon as you log in. You also have log off scripts. So all these things might be malicious, and the problem is they're being written by Microsoft, which is not terribly consistent, and then by every other software developer. So it's really pretty hard to tell if something's suspicious. So I see a chat message coming in. Would WinLogon shell also be used to set a text-only mode? I suppose in principle you could. In practice, I'm skeptical if it would work, but I think you could. It would be kind of fun to try. I think you're right. You might be able to make a text-only version, and that's essentially what the server version is, without the GUI, that you get minimal server core, they call it. That might be how it works. I'm not quite sure, but I know server core does something like that. So if you want to see if mal runs are malicious, here's an example from your book that I thought was pretty good. So here are 4 auto runs. And the question is, can you see which one is malicious? And I used to make people guess interactively back when I used to have these hardware eye clickers. It's not easy to do with the Cahoots. But this one here doesn't have any good description. It's just HPDJ in local settings temp. This one is IPRIP, something for routing interface protocol, and it calls a DIL called IPRINP32.DIL. This is RF alert, which says something about monitoring, but it looks like they spelled monitored wrong. And here it is in DApp's write fax bin from Synergy. And here's something that lets you share your keyboard, and it's Synergy C. I think that service name goes with this one. This line is actually in the wrong place. Anyway, which one of these do you think is malicious? Any guesses? You like B? Probably read the book. Yeah, it is in fact B, but the point is there's no easy way to tell. B is malicious because the real DIL in Windows is IPRIP. This N shouldn't be there and the 32 shouldn't be there. This one here runs from temp and has no description, but it's in fact a genuine HP product, which is rude to the developer. And this one here has a spelling error, but it's also genuine. So that's the problem. You can't tell just by looking at it whether something is malicious, not usually. You have to Google it or something, or go to a malware list. That's what you do. Yeah, you have to. As you know, it's not that easy. Anyway, so here's what they recommend to see if things are malware. First, look for persistent things signed by trusted publishers. Then those are probably okay. Then take things that were created outside the time of interest. So you have an event you're exploring, so there's no point messing around with things that happened outside that time. Then look at the paths. Temp is suspicious. Directory and system root are suspicious. Deeply nested subdirectories specific to parties are probably less suspicious. Then get the MD5 hashes and send them up to VirusTotal or something to see if it's malicious. And take anything remaining unknown and compare it to your golden image, because you have a golden image that you use to deploy the system. So anything on that is presumably good, although this is what got Google and other companies. If you're hacked by an APT like China, they put malware on there that will sleep for up to 3 years before it wakes up. And so your golden image might be infected and you don't know it. That happened to us. There was a lab where the malware kept coming back and it was in the image. It was pretty interesting. I think I still have a sample of that someplace. Anyway, was pretty good stuff. You could run it and it would vanish from the desktop and never come back. It was some kind of rootkit. Anyway, so Autoruns is the sysinternal, now Microsoft product that will find all the automatically launching things, or at least the top 30. There are hundreds of others. There are undocumented ones. You can't find them all, but it finds some of them. Mandia makes this thing called Redline, which they mentioned in the textbook. I tried to use it. I was never able to make Redline work at all. It just runs for hours and gives you nothing. I don't know what good it is at all. Whatever it's used, my lab conditions somehow did not suit whatever the use case of Redline is. And then there's signed malware. As I said, attackers are actually stealing code signing certificates and signing malware. So that's pretty bad. And there are tricks to get past code signing anyway. So signing is not the perfect solution that you might wish it would be. Anyway, I've got 12b2. Let's take a look at these cahoots. If I can find 12b1, we have done. And 12b2 is here. And it moved on me. 12b2. Okay, I might have the right one this time. Let's see. Well, Ron Jeremy's back, but he didn't win.
So tonight all the instructors go to Berkeley?
Elizabeth, Richard, Alan, me, all the security instructors pretty much, yeah.
And who else?
A whole team of students, 6 or 8 of them. I know Travis would have gone, but he just got a job at NCC. So he's off the team because there's a conflict of interest. So he's, I think, the 3rd student to get a job at NCC. And NCC is a great group, so it's good for him. Ah, there you go. That's a good registry. Good. Anyway, let's see what we got here. So the Yahoo toolbar. What is that thing? Browser helper object. Help being a euphemism, in my opinion. All right. Command line utility. Okay, SC, service control. And which one causes malware to launch whenever a program that draws windows starts? Those are the app init dills. Anything that draws windows to interact with the user has to load user32, and then it loads these dills also. And which item normally goes to explorer.exe? That's the Windows logon shell. Okay, so now it's not going to play this stupid animation, which I can do without. So WITB wins again, and WK wins again, and MHino wins again. So good. All right. So I think that's enough. I'm just going to leave the 3rd part to next time because this stuff gets kind of deadening if you do too much. And it's not like we're under strict time crunch. I think we got some extra room in this class, so I'm just going to quit here and record that we ended at 53. All right. So I'll stick around if people want to work on projects or something. And I'll just mention one thing that's happening in my other classes is some students are freaking out. They feel way behind and they want a lot of extra credit. So if that's you, you go the wrong way right here. It's up to 300 points and I'm still adding more to it. So you can learn Go, and it's worth extra credit in any of my classes, although you can't only get the points once. You can't like get 300 and then count it in multiple classes. You could split it up, 100 here and 100 there or something. But anyway, check it out. And if you want instructions, if you look in the videos from last night, which was 127, I have a video that demonstrates how to get started on that. So I don't think I'll do it live here because it would be redundant because I have too many students in multiple classes. But right here is the video about Go. So you can see there it even reveals several of the early flags which should get you started. And these are all structured like a proper CTF. The first couple, there's complete instructions, and then there's harder and harder ones with no instructions to challenge you. But even if you only do the easy ones, it can add up to a lot of points, and you'll learn some Go. Go is good for you. You won't be sorry you learned Go. Anyway, any questions about anything? I'm going to stop the recording.